Got a family, earn my living with my hand, a rolling steel mill, downtown Birmingham. My daddy was a barber, the most unsightly man. Was born in Tuscaloosa, but he died right here in Birmingham. This entire land, there ain't no place like Birmingham. You can travel across this entire land.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Title of this episode, the Alabama Senatorial Primary, which will be held later today in and across the state of Alabama. They expect a low turnout, 20 to 30%, which is probably normal for a primary in August. Most states would not consider having a primary in August. However, when you deal with Alabama politics, you're dealing with a different animal, if you let me use that analogy here. And nonetheless, we'll start with it. We have basically three contenders. One named Mr. Strange, Luther Strange, otherwise known as Big Luther. He's 64 years old. Judge Roy Moore, twice to the Supreme Court, removed once, then resigned. He's 70 years old. And the winner needs to secure 50% of the vote. The other candidate is named Mo Brooks. He's a representative, and he is in third place in most polls. Let me just give these polling numbers here. The Trafalgar Group poll has Roy Moore leading 37.72 to 24.42 for Luther Strange. The Emerson poll shows the two at a virtual heap, with Strange leading 32% to 29%, meaning the race was too close to call in that particular situation. Now, the conventional wisdom, if there is any conventional wisdom, is it will move on to a runoff election on the 26th of September. More than likely, Iowa Strange Moore will be the candidates there. And of course, Brooks, who is in third place, he has 15% of the vote in the Emerson College poll, and 17.42% of the vote in the Trafalgar poll. To get it right in a minute, they have been around for a long time. He is a fiscal conservative who opposed the Republican Party's plan to replace Obamacare because it didn't go far enough there. Trump has endorsed Big Luther, who was once considered the clear favorite. Most recently, he tweeted, Luther Strange, the great state of Alabama, has my endorsement. He is strong on border and wall, the military, taxes, and law enforcement. Well, so what? But Roy Moore used to be the Chief Justice there, so he's ran many statewide races in Alabama. He's, of course, not as well funded as Big Luther. Big Luther had the support of Mitch McConnell. His endorsement even from the NRA, so he's the Washington insider. But Trump has been critical of McConnell. So it says from Roy Moore, he resents people from Washington raising money in Washington, sending negative ads to Alabama, trying to control the vote of the people. That is what Judge Moore had to say. Judge Moore's campaign on a strong military. Naturally, they like that in Alabama. To protect the Mexican border, defunding of Planned Parenthood, same-sex marriage, civil unions, etc. He's endorsed by James Hobson, Chuck Norris, Duck Dynasty star, which I suppose has a lot of clout there, Phil Robinson, and the former governor Forbes James and his son Tim James. The race is viewed as a referendum on McConnell. McConnell is not very well liked there. On the Democratic side, you have Doug Jones polling at 40% at Emerson College. Jones was recently endorsed by Vice President Biden. Next closest Democrat is one called Robert Kennedy Jr., no relation to the Kennedys of Massachusetts. He is at 23%, and at 25% were undecided. No Democrats held the Senate since Howard Heflin in 1997. So it has been a very long drought there. And from Alabama.com, we just talked about the three candidates here, what the polls showed in terms of them, and we won't go over that. Sort of a roundup here, Alabama voters for the 6 times since 1914, and this is based upon an article that appeared on the Crystal Ball from the University of Virginia, and our condolences go out to the people in Charlottesville. But the stakes are high. Republicans know their statewide primary have lately decided the eventual winner. Voters haven't elected a Democrat to statewide office in Alabama since 2006, and the Senate we talked about Harold Heflin, who switched parties. For example, there's an intriguing alliance of D.J. Trump, Mitch McConnell, whose relationships otherwise seems more picky by the day. There is so much going on in and around the election, not just with candidates. That is from Cal Gillison, a professor of political science at the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. I think it does have the implications beyond the state of Alabama for divisions within the Republican Party. Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard. Normally these kinds of off-cycle multi-candidate primaries don't usually have national implications, but McConnell has invested heavily in Big Luther, that he's made it kind of a test of establishment versus a grassroots. That's where Judge Moore is. Nationally, many Trump devotees have been lining up behind Representative Brooks of Huntsville, I didn't know he was Huntsville, viewing him as a strong supporter of the President's America First agenda. On Thursday, Brooks on Thursday called Trump to rescind the endorsement and jump on his side, and it appears to be going nowhere at week's end. Trump won Alabama by the widest margin since 1972. That was when Dr. McGovern ran. Remains popular in the state. Strange skeptics acknowledge that the endorsement is a boom for his campaign, but the latest poll, we talked about that before, headed to a runoff. Now, if he heads to a runoff with Roy Moore, it'll be very interesting to see where Big Luther ends up in this ball game. The commercials that have been running by Big Luther is trying to paint Brooks as a never Trump based on statements made during the primary. He backed Line Ted Cruz of Texas in that primary. Traditionally, Alabama has never liked outsiders telling them they ought to vote, and that's according to Stewart. He's a professor emeritus of politics at the University of Alabama. This was even true back during the days of FDR. He suggests that true effect would be to diminish Moore's vote. Stewart said Brooks has been more consistently conservative than Strange is viewed as DC's man, in other words, Big Luther in Alabama. Strange, prior to being appointed to take Beauregard Sessions' place, served 6 years as the state's attorney general, spent much of the 80s and 90s as a lobbyist, and I'm assuming that is coming up in the campaign there. I think Luther comes out ahead. It will show the Washington establishment still able to extend considerable power outside the Beltway. That's according to Professor Stewart. On the other hand, if Brooks or Moore come out ahead, it will show that Alabamans prefer to pick their own Senate, if you please, senator, excuse me. This means no demolition of support amongst our people for President Trump. So the millions that have been sent in to Big Luther by McConnell to attack Brooks, and most recently attacking Moore because Judge Moore is ahead in the primary. So they've even tried to apply Brooks to use Ty Brooks to Nancy Pelosi. And that is a stretch within it. But if Luther-Strange is not the nominee, especially if he doesn't even make the runoff, which is a distant possibility, then old McConnell's donors are going to be furious at McConnell for wasting $8 million. You can imagine they put $8 million into that. That's that Senate Leadership Fund, they call it, is an offshoot of Uncle Carl Rove's American Crossroads. There. Up until the Alabama primary, the PAC mostly stayed out of primary battles. Wise decision on their part. If Luther is not the nominee, especially if he doesn't even make the runoff, well, anyway, we got that. Bruce Oppenheimer, a professor of public policy education at Vanderbilt, that's in Nashville, Tennessee. Undoubtedly, if Strange wins, the president will take credit, as will McConnell. Perhaps that will hold some Republican senators from deep red states closer to the president for the short term, but I doubt that it implies its impact will persist through 2018 because of other events intervening. Plus, many states, not like Alabama, a Trump endorsement of being supportive of Trump will not play the same way. So that is one of the situations there. And back to the analysis from the people at the University of Virginia. Alabama has previously held special elections in 1919, 1920, 1938, 1946, 1976. Now, some of those elections were under the apartheid voting method. The poll tax African Americans were excluded. Now, African Americans will not play a role in this election on the Republican side. 20 to 25% turnout could be beneficial for GOP candidates polling behind Strange, Moore, and Brooks. So we'll see. I mean, this thing could be wide open. There's no doubt about that. The low turnouts that they normally have, we have a lot more time, well, no doubt before 2018. That is a stretch within itself, but it doesn't mean the Democrats aren't trying. Now, the voters last elected Democrat to the Senate, that was Richard Shelby. He switched parties in 1992, 2 years later. But that was a different type of Democrat in those days. Jones has the endorsement of people like John Lewis, and we talked about earlier there. So we'll see how that turns out. This Robert Kennedy is performing pretty well also in the election. So we'll see there. In the polling, I should say. The Democrats' general election outcome could be telling. That's from Nordinger, is a professor at George Washington University. This is the kind of thing where Hillary Clinton got, 34% of the vote, so I guess Hillary is the minimum you can expect from a Democrat. On a national level, if a Democratic candidate gets 45%, eyebrows tend to be raised. No doubt about that. That in itself... From the LA Times, Trump's choice in Alabama Senate race is struggling ahead. That is Big Luther. Big Luther is, no doubt, struggling with McConnell. McConnell hasn't been very successful lately at getting anything done, including a baseball game. More troubling, Big Luther is towering. He's 6'9", is known locally. That Moore has held steady in the polls. Well, Judge Moore is more of a populist. He's a colorful, well-known figure. There, former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, had his big 10 Commandments statute going on there. Luther has a tough battle in his hands, according to Brent Buchanan, a president of a consulting firm, Signer, he's how to pronounce it, in Alabama, which is not working with any candidate. You have to tear down Moore, but nobody ever figured out an effective formula to do that. No doubt about it, Moore has been around a long time. So as money pours in for Big Luther, $4 million from McConnell. We had $8 million up there just a minute ago. Though we're not the different committees, I suppose. Others are still inspired by Moore for his strong stance, particularly on social issues. Brooks retains strong following as a conservative member of the House Freedom Caucus. But will that help him in Alabama? Very, very difficult to say. Suggests that he will take seriously his power and potential to impact the election. That is from Steve Law, a former aide. It's shown that the president is willing to engage in Senatorial. Well, that's kind of a little bit of a waste of time. Big Luther rolls on, and this is even the New York Times. All this is on the 6'9" Big Luther, as he's called. And then, of course, we have Jones in the primary also on the Democratic side. And Judge Moore is evidently a very good campaigner. So he's out there. The party must be maybe in for a surprise. That's according to Judge Moore. This is from the New York Times. So what we've been doing here is stitching together various people. Brooks is down on his knees praying. Well, he's probably praying for victory. Anyway, nonetheless, Big Luther was appointed by the former governor Bentley, who was forced to resign after an adulterous relationship. So, again, what is Trump's endorsement worth? It's probably worth more in Alabama than it would be in some other places along the way. It is drawing national attention. This is from Alabama.com, and we don't want to rehash. I think this is actually a rehash here of other things. So how this election will go, well, we'll see what Judge Moore is able to do. If Judge Moore comes out on top, Big Luther could be in trouble, but again, this is where the other candidate there will be Brooks. Brooks is more established than Ben Moore, but if Moore were to say come out with 40% of the vote or something like that, you'd have one race coming. Now, if in the general election, how that would go with Jones, well, we don't know on that one. He's in Birmingham, a lawyer, period there. And not much attention, obviously, is paid to him. Now, let's look at the national situation with old DJ. Well, let's first go to some of the fallout here. DJ Trump denounced his associates in the alt-right KKK Nazi movement after the killing of the lady in Heather in Charlottesville. And that caused trouble also for the site, the Daily Stormer. The Daily Stormer, neo-Nazi site, is not storming anymore. They made disparaging remarks about Ms. Hillier. And GoDaddy, who is hosting the site, kicked them off. So they're gone from GoDaddy. Incidentally, one of our sites is also hosted by GoDaddy. But the hosting site is not, that's your domain. In other words, the domain hosting site, let me get that straight there, does not actually have the domain on it. But it does have the DNS, that sort of thing. So nonetheless, they were forced to move on. They moved to Google, and Google is vanishing them. Also now, what happens is when Google decides to vanish them, it takes a few hours, usually about 24 hours, for the DNS servers to reset. So probably they are still shown as being at Google. And there's also Tucals, that is out of Toronto. They are also promising to, as they say, dispatch the storm there. So in other words, a lot of storm clouds have been moving over this. One of these Confederate statues was toppled in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina. We were looking at it, demonstrators there. There have been vigils all over the country. Durham, a crowd in downtown Durham on a Monday night left a statue of a Confederate soldier that had been erect for a century, crumbled on the ground. And this is from the Durham paper by Virginia Bridges out of Durham, Carolina. The governor criticized it, saying racism and deadly violence in Charlotte is unacceptable, but there is a better way to remove these monuments. Well, they just put the monument down, and several left-wing parties were involved. The Workers' World Party, hadn't heard of them in a while. But anyway, they were there. No cops, no KKK, no fascists, USA. One of their battle cries there. Social Democrats of America, they were around, and whomever else. The IWW, Industrial Workers of the World, they were there also. So in other words, many of those in a picture knocking down the statue. Mr. Scarzamuzzi has been making his rounds. He was on Stephen Colbert's show talking about his resignation, the president's process of late coming to the party, about denouncing the white supremacists. So a lot of things have been going on out there. Mr. Frazier, the head of Merck, an African American, quit the president's council. The CEO of Under Armour also quit, and Intel said too they are resigning from the Manufacturers Conference Council. So in other words, what is happening to DJ Trump? His influence is waning in the business community. Some of the business community, whether they would tell you that or not, were clapping, doing pinwheels and what have you on the election of DJ Trump. The stock market was waiting on him, the tax reform. But all those things seem to be clouded when a president has such low approval ratings as a DJ Trump. Things start to happen, as you see what is happening in Alabama. And now this manufacturing council, these people are still in favor of manufacturing, but not a DJ Trump, a slap in the face. DJ Trump, as the Fix used to say, had the worst week in Washington, no doubt about that. And this Charlottesville with Miss Harrier there, Miss Harrier being killed by this fool named Fields. Now they're saying that Fields had, as they say, issues with anger. He tried to strangle his mother or whatever he did to his mother. She called the police on him. But that was several years ago. He tried the Army, did about 4 months. He was kicked out. So in other words, the only thing you could do with that gentleman was put some double loser things on him, and that would be the end of that. Let me just go to Reuters here. I wanted to, if we can, grab this story here. 3 CEOs have went out. Incidentally, Smart Cookie, as he's known, the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Mr. Kim, as he's known, Mr. Wu. Anyway, Mr. Kim has decided that for now he'll put on hold the firing of missiles towards Guam. So he's got that on hold, but he reads newspapers also. As a story here on the Sports End, and we'll do the sports in a minute. Tiger Woods had 5 drugs in his system at the time of the DWI arrest. Well, so he had 5 in his system, had back pain there. Period. Prices of petrol overnight tumbled on the strength of the dollar. China concerns. So in other words, the international economy is not as rosy as one would say. This is from Reuters. Let's see what's DJ Trump doing now. Oh, to sign executive order on infrastructure projects. That's his latest scheme. But the problem DJ Trump has as days move on here, less attention to him is being paid. And as less attention be paid. Now, this is a story we wanted to get the tech companies here. On the open source report, which is our technical report, in crosshairs on white supremacy, free speech, the neo-Nazi site, the Daily Stormer, has had internet domain registers revoked twice in less than 24 hours because of Charlottesville GoDaddy. We mentioned of them. After GoDaddy, they moved on over to Google domains. The Stormer's domain was registered after 8 a.m. on Monday, and by 10 a.m., Google was in the process of telling them goodbye. That was enough of Google because of the response of Unite the Right operation there. 2Cal, we talked about that, days which would previously provided website services masking Angeline's phone number and email address, said the Daily Stormer had breached the terms of the contract. That's 2Cal's out of Toronto. It's a dangerous site. Several other companies also taken action there that stopped hiding their domain registration information. So that is out there. Angeline didn't respond to requests. Another Discord, that's a company in San Francisco that allows video gamers, and this evidently Fields was into videos, did not mince words. We'll continue to take action against white supremacists, etc. Another company, Trawillo, Larson tweeted that the company would update its policy to prohibit hate speech. Facebook is beeping up its content monitoring terms, and Google is pushing hard on new technology to help monitor and delete YouTube videos that celebrate violence. So in other words, all this is expanding because of what has happened in Charlotte, North Carolina. The same situation that happened in the Midwest with Justine DeMond. Evidently, and I put it on the Facebook, the police authorities in Minnesota had searched her house for, of all things, like weapons. She was not killed in her house. Drugs, guns, all kinds of things of that nature, even written notes. Now, the people in the neighborhood are up in arms about it. The attorney for the family looked the other way. But the situation is, normally, unless the crime were committed in the house, you would have not had that search warrant issued under normal circumstances. And in the previous case with Philando Castile, that same group of law enforcement types were busily trying to connect Philando with gang activity and all sorts of other things, searched his house, searched his girlfriend's house. They also looked for drugs at Justine's house. I mean, all of this is to victimize the victim twice. The state killed the woman, and then they're going to victimize the woman's reputation. That is an unfortunate situation, no doubt about that. Now let's go to the baseball scores. And Cleveland was in Boston today. Cleveland ended up winning the game 7-3 over the Red Sox. The Mets were at the Yankees, and a city rivalry there. Yankees 4-2. It was tied when I was looking at it earlier. Anyway, nonetheless, the Rays were in Toronto. Blue Jays 2-1. The Giants were in Florida, the Marlins 8-3 over the Giants. The Tigers were in Texas, 6-2 Rangers over the Tigers. Used to be G.W. Bush's team. And in a slugfest at Wrigley Field, Cubs 15-5 over the Reds. Atlanta was in Denver, and they were shut out by the Rockies. The Astros were shut out in Arizona, 2-0. The Royals and Athletics out in Oakland, Royals 6-2. The Orioles and Mariners in Seattle. Baltimore 11-2 in that contest. The Phillies and Padres down in San Diego. Padres 7-4 in that contest. And that is the baseball scores. That will do it for us. The Alabama Senatorial primary is the subject of the episode on the 15th of August 2017 from WBRM Radio in Boston. We're working on an open source report. We'll have that out in the next few days for this week. And we'll talk more about domain hosting. And the actual site hosting is obviously at a different place, or it can be at several different places. I believe there was also a proxy server involved in this, but the people at the Daily Stormer are trying to find a place. Also, we posted a statement from Anonymous. Now, there has been some information out there about Anonymous and what they were trying to do. Some allege that the Daily Stormer's site was hacked. We don't know. And it was an anonymous statement. The first statement, not the statement I posted. Was it actually from Anonymous or from someone else? We don't know. But in the game of politics, there are many, many actors out there that could hack the Daily Stormer's site. And this puts ISP domain hosters in a quarry, because if you host that particular site, you're subject to denial of service attacks and various boycotts. That is why even a right-wing site like GoDaddy, under their administration, decided to let the Daily Stormer go. And Google, with their own problems, they didn't want to see the Daily Stormer. But there are other domain hosting sites all over the world, and probably in Eastern Europe or someplace, will pick up the Daily Stormer and perhaps even host their site. We don't know. Good day.